Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about none other than
Wonder Woman 1984.
we all know that Wonder Woman 1984 was supposed to be one of the big movies of 2020.
They were saying it was going to be the $1 billion maker, that it was going to be a good one. They were saying that Black Widow would probably be mediocre, while Wonder Woman 1984 would be the great one.
Yeah. And that was my expectation as well early on. I was really excited about Wonder Woman 1984, especially because I enjoyed the first movie so much. I'm not saying the first movie was flawless in every way, but I was really happy as somebody who was just an audience member who was casually watching it and who was pleasantly surprised that DC actually put out a good movie, because that's always a shock. Post the Nolan trilogy, there really hasn't been any good DC movies since then. So that was the first time that there was really a good DC movie. And so then we fast forward, that was 2017, so now we're in 2020. Wonder Woman 1984 has been delayed, even before its final release date, which was in June. Then because of COVID, it was pushed back to August. Then also because of COVID, it was pushed back to October. Then also because of COVID.
It actually went June, July, August, October, November, and then December. They just kept moving it up.
They just keep moving it back. And finally, they were just like, let's release it on HBO Max on Christmas Day.
And it's not just because of theaters, it's because HBO Max was a dead streaming service, and they thought, if we release this movie on there, then maybe that'll save us.
And a little side note here, I'm not impressed with HBO Max at all. Their lineup of stuff outside of just Wonder Woman 1984 is pretty much null and void. They have the Lord of the Rings trilogy, which everybody has on DVD. Who needs to stream that movie trilogy? I don't know. They have the Wonder Woman TV series from the 70s, which is probably the only good thing on there, at least for me, but it's dated, it's old, it's not anything that's going to draw in a new crowd. It's a nostalgia play. And then finally, what else do they have on there? Did they just have
I don't know.
They have like the new Justice League movie that was terrible. They have Suicide Squad, which was terrible. They have Birds of Prey, which was terrible.
They don't have any of the DCAU stuff. DCAU meaning animated. They just got Batman, the animated series, on there, which is amazing that they haven't had that before. But
it's terrible content. And so fortunately for them, they are sticking with their brand, and they've added another piece of terrible content known as
Wonder Woman 1984. And I want to say, you brought up Birds of Prey, you brought up Suicide Squad. This might be the worst, 1984 might be the worst DCAU movie. The only reason I don't give that to Birds of Prey is Birds of Prey had some things in it that weren't as bad as I expected.
Yeah.
For example, I'll just throw it out there, the R rating, it wasn't really R rated, it was just like, it's called R rated because there was like 2 F words in it. It wasn't R rated, like, it wasn't like Deadpool.
Yeah.
It was just,
which I find funny. I think the rating system makes 0 sense whatsoever. Like, you can get an R rating for having more than a certain number of F words in it, but you can be PG-13 if you just maintain just below a certain level of blood shown on screen. It just doesn't make any sense.
But 1984, people are saying, no, it can't be worse than Justice League. It can't be worse than Suicide Squad.
It can't be worse than The Hobbit, The Battle of Five Armies.
It's as bad, at least as bad as The Battle of Five Armies.
It is one of the worst movies I've ever seen in my life. And this is coming from a diehard Wonder Woman fan.
And the reason I say that is every one of these movies, don't get me wrong, these other movies are absolutely terrible. They might have like one thing in it, though, like Batman versus Superman. At least the visuals were nice. At least the visuals.
Yeah. The visuals weren't even like... They were fine, but I'm not here to watch the visuals.
I know, I'm saying any other movie had just like one thing that you can say, well, at least this was okay, or at least this performance was good, or something like that. This one, I didn't find any silver lining whatsoever. I didn't see any performances that were good. There were no scenes that I thought were really good. There weren't even concepts in the movie where I thought, well, that was a good idea if you just did it better. I didn't even think that.
There was nothing redeeming about this movie. I have to say, and for those of you who follow me on Twitter, which is the majority of you, I did a tweet thread while I was watching the movie live, and after about an hour, I was like standing up. So we were at my apartment, my whole family, watching this movie because you can't see it in the theater anymore in California, and I was standing up in my living room like, can we just like end this
it
and
was
watch
like
something
a half
else?
hour to an hour within the movie, and you were like, can we watch something else?
Yeah,
you paid $15
I paid
for it.
$15 for that movie, and I didn't want to finish it because I was just so uncomfortable by how bad it was and how bad it was how bad it made me feel too.
It was one of those movies that made me feel uncomfortable watching it.
It was uncomfortable to watch because it was so bad, and also because it was taking characters that I had an emotional attachment to and just kind of turning them into caricatures or reducing them to stereotypes.
So we should get into like why it's so bad, though, not just saying how bad it is. So it has this really nonsensical plot. That
explain the plot too.
Okay, the plot. First of all, this movie was very, very long, which is a risk when you have a movie this bad. You should not take risks on movies you think, and they knew that this movie was a risk. You should not take risks on movies you think that audiences might hate. You make it worse when you make it too long. But anyway, what I can loosely define as a plot, which makes no sense, there's plot holes all throughout it, is that Wonder Woman finds this stone randomly that some people were trying to steal from a black market that was within a mall, and this stone just happens to be one that grants wishes. Mm-hmm. And then I didn't even see the scene where Wonder Woman made a wish.
They didn't even make it clear. She didn't actually make a wish out loud. She like holds the stone and closes her eyes, and we all know that she's thinking about Steve, but she doesn't actually out loud make a wish. I want to
talk about that in a minute. Anyway, but then there's the villain, and the villains are awful. The villains are worse than it's worse than Topher Grace, Venom. It's worse than, well, Jared Leto was pretty bad, but he was barely in the movie, so that was one thing. This gives you the worst villains we've ever seen in superhero movies.
Let me explain something about the villains, because the marketing led me to believe that the big villain was supposed to be Cheetah. And not only, we're not just talking about the marketing, we're talking about the merchandise. The toys were Cheetah and Wonder Woman. So I'm sitting here thinking, okay, we're going to have a big, even if she's not the best villain or the best portrayal of a villain on screen, we're going to have a really cool looking female villain, because that's what they marketed it as. And then the villain turns out to be not Cheetah. She's just kind of a side joke character.
Yeah, she is.
The actual villain of the movie is a guy loosely based off of Donald Trump.
It was loosely like someone who's never watched Donald Trump and is just reacting to what other people have said about Donald Trump. Yeah, it's like nobody,
whoever made both the actor and whoever wrote the lines for this character, whoever came up with the concept for this character, had never actually watched a video or seen how Trump actually behaves, and just said, let's make a big bad, and let's make him kind of look like Trump, and let's make him talk with his hands and stuff, and like any Italian is going to do that, and let's make him talk like kind of like this, which is not how Trump talks, but it's how people mock Trump talking. And even if you're not a Trump supporter, it was a bad caricature, because it's got to be funny. Like, both sides usually can agree when something is funny.
And it's not fun whether no one wants to hear about politics now.
People are watching movies to get away from politics. And clearly this movie, given the original release dates, was supposed to come out pre-election and be commentary on Trump. People don't want to watch movies, especially these days, but this is just generally why people watch movies, is for escapism, to get away from the things that stress them out. And 2020 politics have been
so stressful.
Yeah, to say the least.
I mean, I think this was one of those movies where they paid certain critics at first, because this is one of the movies where the first reviews were stellar and then the later reviews were awful.
Yeah.
So the first wave, obviously, they probably paid some critics, and they were like, this is exactly what we need right now. And I'm like, no.
I don't even think those critics watched the movie. No, they just were told what to say. But anyway,
yeah, so the worst villains ever, they were silly. They were uncomfortable to watch.
Even Cheetah wasn't just a side character. She was a joke of a side character, because she portrayed, and this is a larger problem that I had with the movie, is there's this trope that you can see who made this movie. It was a woman who directed this movie and who had a huge hand in writing it. And apparently Gal Gadot had a hand in the creation of this movie as well, which is shameful and embarrassing. But it was a repeating mantra of the stereotype of the 35 to 40-year-old woman who's single, who either was divorced or never had romance in her life, and who's depressed because she's alone and lonely. And it, first of all, no, oh my gosh, that's the most pathetic stereotype ever. And no one wants to hear about that, about an old lady whining. And then secondly, that's what they reduced the villain to. So she was pathetic. She couldn't stand up for herself. All this stuff.
So we've covered...
even when, hang on. They also changed Diana's character so that she was like that too. She was the single, early 30-something who lost her boyfriend, and that was her entire motivation for the movie. Hang on. Her entire motivation for the movie was that she was missing Steve, and she behaved selfishly, especially towards the end. She's like, I'm not going to give up Steve, which was her wish granted to come true, even though it wasn't really even Steve. It was a superimposed face on somebody else's body.
Which is so creepy.
Yeah, it was
she was
weird.
Gonna take over this guy's...
Yeah.
She was gonna, I'll just say it, she was sleeping with this guy. She was gonna take over his life, this man's life.
Who had Steve's memories and face.
And here's the...
It was the creepiest, weirdest thing ever.
This is the crux of the Wonder Woman's plot, and it doesn't work at all. The plot with Steve Trevor doesn't work from the beginning because it wants it to be this really emotional thing, especially, it's like it's all building up to that scene where she has to renounce her wish, and that's what they were all talking about.
But that was confusing.
That doesn't work because in the beginning, I don't get the sense that Diana, she says she sacrificed so much. I'm not seeing that because we get one dopey scene in the beginning where she fights, but I don't see any sacrifice. I see her just, ignoring everyone who wants to spend time with her, at that party, when all these men are just like asking her to dance or something. She's like, no, like it comes off as she's selfish, and she has been waiting for like 50 or 30 years for Steve, and she hasn't tried anything else.
It's been like 50, no, not even 50. It's been like 70 years.
It just comes off like she's selfish and snooty, and she doesn't want to try anything else.
Yeah.
And then when Steve's there, he's just a plank of wood. He's just
he has no personality, although he all of a sudden he was a World War I pilot who somehow knew how to fly a plane built in the 80s.
And he doesn't
with no training.
They barely even do the fish out of water thing. He's like, okay, I'm in a future time. I mean, he's not a character.
Yeah, which is why one of the reasons why he was so unbelievable, because I was like, this isn't real. Like, this isn't Steve. And I just want to bring this element in. We all could see beforehand how much Chris Pine just looked like he hated being in those interviews, those pre-release interviews where the cast all sits down and jokes around, and everybody else is like playing it up and pretending like they all just love the movie and they just love the cast, and we're all a family and we just love it all, and it's so good. He's just sitting there like, because he knew it was a bad movie.
He
knew from the beginning. Yeah, and they reduced his character to just a trophy boy, and he had no personality and no character and nothing else. So
also, I wanted, since we're talking about it, I mentioned the one scene in the beginning where she does Wonder Woman stuff. Mm-hmm. When people were complaining that there wasn't enough action, people were being mocked as like, oh, you want just a 40-minute Avengers battle. That's not what people are talking about. There's barely any of Wonder Woman being Wonder Woman. There's barely any superhero movie stuff.
There's barely of really Wonder Woman at all in the movie, because they spent so much time on Cheetah and
she's
the
not
Trump
really
guy.
Cheetah. It's Trump guy and the weird lady who's not even Cheetah. So there's like no supervillains. There's no superhero. There's no
which
heroic
makes sense.
plot.
It makes sense even in the marketing and the interviews. The two people that talked the most in the interviews were actually the actors that played those two villains. The movie is the villain.
There was so little stuff of actual superhero movies. I didn't feel like I was watching one. I felt like I was watching a rom-com or something.
Yeah.
A really, really
really
bad rom-com. It wasn't even funny.
Yeah.
It tries to be funny at times and just is awkward, like when they make Steve try on 80s clothes and it isn't funny at all because they just try to circle back and do the fish out.
It feels like he isn't, first of all, he isn't Steve. It feels like it's Chris Pine just like putting up with the fact that he's here. Likely he had been contracted for these 2 movies or 3, as the case may be, and he was required to be a part of this movie even though he may not have wanted to be. And so it was like he was just there kind of putting up with it.
Yeah, and Steve doesn't have a character arc, he doesn't have a story, he doesn't have anything, he's just there.
Yeah.
And it's terrible. After I said that, I remember saying that the romance in the first Wonder Woman movie, I said that's one of the best done love interests because he was actually developed by himself.
Yeah.
And then they squandered it into one of the worst. Like, I can't imagine anyone liking the Wonder Woman Steve Trevor romance after this movie because it's just like
It hurts.
It hurts. Like this movie.
I was physically in pain
it
after that
expects you
movie.
to care about it so much.
Yeah.
When it doesn't give you any reason, it gives you reason to hate it because of how selfish Diana is.
Yeah, it
acting.
makes Diana be just a selfish brat who's like, oh, everything's so hard for me, and I'm like, oh yeah, really? You're a superhero.
We don't see any of her hardship.
We also don't get to see her life on Themyscira. She doesn't go back and visit her family. There's none of that. We see this weird scene at the beginning that portrays her as a child as being a whiny brat who was, I don't know, almost kind of a Mary Sue.
Entitled.
Entitled. And then she continues to be that throughout the rest of the movie, even into her adult years.
Again, that's why I wanted to say this doesn't feel like a superhero movie. There's no heroism.
Yeah.
There's and at the end, it's like she asks everybody to renounce their wishes. And everyone just does, and it gets really cheesy where a guy goes like, I wish you were dead to someone, and she dies, and that was his wish. And there's a weird montage of scenes, and someone joked online that that someone says, I renounce my wish, and the kid beside her goes, thanks, Mom, I have cancer again. So this is just a horribly conceived plot.
Yes.
And people were confused, like, did the same people make this movie? And the first movie was actually Zack Snyder with a bunch of different writers constructing the script, while this movie, they let Patty Jenkins do the directing and the script.
Which is very, very apparent in the characters, especially going back to the trope of the 35 to 40-year-old woman who's lonely, sad, stereotypically single, and depressed. And that was the overarching theme, because I'm not saying that Patty Jenkins is lonely, 35 to 40-something, stereotypically single female. However, it just seems like she brought some sort of personal experience into this movie, since both of her female leads had that personality.
Well, and this movie, after they were saying that Wonder Woman was breaking the stereotypes in that the first movie,
she embraced stereotypes. We went right back to
a woman can direct a popular superhero action film, and now we go back to the stereotypes that women only want romantic comedies.
It's true.
And that's also what happened with the Birds of Prey movie too. It came off of like a chick flick. It wasn't an action movie at all.
It's really, really embarrassing to me that someone can be that obvious with their own life experience, and this is the only element that I find funny.
The only thing worse about this is if Patty Jenkins was signed on to do a Star Wars movie. And she is, and I remember when she was announcing, people
wait, are you
like,
serious?
She is Rogue Squadron.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Luckily, with the flux of movies this time, you never know what's gonna happen.
Yeah, everything changes. And
also, I just thought when they announced that, people were like, "Oh, good, she's gonna save Star Wars," and I'm like, because I had heard the rumors about this movie. I didn't know how bad it was going to be.
No.
I heard about the nonsense about Steve being really another guy early on, and I thought they were going to change that.
Yeah.
And I thought that's why they were doing reshoots, because the story.
That's probably one of the worst elements. That and the Trump guy were probably the worst elements
This
of the movie.
did a test screening. This was part of the reason it was being delayed so long. This did a test screening, and it did so badly it leaked online, and like there was hate everywhere. Like this was the worst movie they'd ever made. I'm wondering how bad it was before they did reshoots.
Yeah, if this is the corrected version, how bad was the other one? Please release it so that the scientific community can study this disaster. So I do want to wrap this up, but I just wanted to finalize my final point is the fact that Wonder Woman / Diana doesn't actually save the day in the end. They go back to this idea that everybody is basically good, including even the Trump character. And if they just would tap into that inner goodness and just renounce their bad wishes, then everything would be right in the world again, and we wouldn't have war, and we wouldn't have nuclear weapons.
But we would always have bad movies.
We would always have bad movies. So that's my story. It's such a bad movie. I can't. I mean, 0 out of 0 stars is too high of a rating for this movie.
I want coronavirus to permanently cripple WB so they can't make any more DC movies for the next 10 years.
Oh, 10 years isn't long enough.
20 years.
They need a 50-year ban. They should have like, what is it? It's not the FDA, but what's the one that controls the radio?
The FCC?
The FCC should permanently ban Warner Brothers from having any access to any superhero content whatsoever, because they're just that awful. So Thank you guys for watching this video. I really appreciate all the support. Comment below what you guys thought about Wonder Woman 1984 because it was just a dumpster fire, but I would like to hear all of you complain about the dumpster fire in the comment section. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell to get notifications when I go live or post a new video, and I will talk to you guys on the next video.